When it comes to audio interfaces, most streamers and content creators on Twitch and YouTube swear on the THIS GoXLR. Besides just the looks, it actually offers a decent amount of input choices, a solid preamp, as well as hardware accelerated tools for noise gates, equalizers, and many more. Not to forget the button. But the main thing that makes the GoXLR stand out is audio routing. The ability to separate different sound sources and bind them onto the sliders while also differentiating between sounds that go to the stream or recording software and what comes to your headphones. For a long time, the GoXLR was unique in how much it could feature for a price of under $400. But since streaming and content creation has increased rapidly since then, that time has changed. And with that, I'd like to show you one, if not the best alternative to the GoXLR. Meet the presonus Revelator io44. Coming in at roughly $170, it is even less than half of the price of the GoXLR, and even a tiny bit cheaper than the GoXLR Mini. Audio-wise, it basically comes with everything that you would expect from an interface like this. On the bottom, we have one XLR input, a headphone jack for both input and output, as well as a line-in port. On the top, we find two 6.35mm jacks for speakers, which can also be muted via a button for some reason. And last but not least, a USB-C port for connecting it with your PC. Basic configurations can be done right on the device itself, whereas you can even use two preset buttons that can store custom profiles. The cool thing about the Revelator io44 is that basically everything runs on the device itself. The biggest advantages of this are that 1, you're not wasting any CPU power, and 2, you can just simply take the device, plug it in somewhere else, and just keep using it like normal. In comparison, this is not as easy on the GoXLR, since as soon as it loses power, the configuration is just gone. Yeah, that kinda sucks. Alright, I think we've talked enough about technical specs and everything, so let me show you how you can utilize the full potential of this device. In order to configure our Revelator io44, we're going to need the Universal Control application, which is compatible with Windows and macOS. Awesome side note here, there is also an Android and iOS app, which can control the Universal Control application remotely, so that you get basically the same mixer experience like you would on a GoXLR. Just without the fancy sliders, of course. Anyway, after you've installed the software, you should already see your io44 down here. But before we click on it, make sure that you set your sample rate nothing higher than 48 kHz if you plan to use it with OBS, since it doesn't support more anyway. If you want to use the interface with professional audio tools, then sure, go ahead and crank it. Okay, now let's come to the fun part. Go ahead and click on the io44 to open up the device configuration. In here, we can see our volume sliders, our button presets, as well as the so-called fat channel configuration, which holds all of the effects like noise gates, equalizers, compressors, and so on. Let me explain what each slider stands for. The first 3 sliders are all our inputs. We have the XLR input, the headset input, as well as line-in. The next 3 sliders are outputs, which can be used to separate, for example, your game audio from music or a Discord call. And that is all for now. I'm going to cover the different audio mixes later in the video once we come to it. So let's go ahead and start by setting up our microphone first. Depending on your microphone, the first thing you want to check is if you need 48V phantom power in order for it to work. My Rode NT5 pencil condenser mic does need it, so I'm just going to go ahead and enable it. The next step is to set our microphone gain. In order to find the right loudness, what you want to do is just talk into the microphone like you would normally. Hold down the left mouse key on the gain and drag it to the right. What we're aiming for is to keep our voice level between -10 and -6 decibels. This gives us a really nice tolerance for audio peaks. Alright, so now that that's finished, let's move on to the fat channel to make our voice sound silky smooth. Before we start with the configuration, make sure that you've selected playback as your audio device inside Windows or macOS, and turn the blend setting on the right to -1. This allows you to only hear your own voice. Now, these presets are neat and everything, but they lack control. So let's go to the advanced settings by clicking on one of these 2 buttons. Let's start by adding a high-pass filter that eliminates some really low and rumbling frequencies. I recommend to set this somewhere around 50 to 60 Hz. We don't want to go too high on this value, because otherwise we're just going to cut out vocals. Alright, now the next step is to configure a noise gate. What a noise gate does is that it cuts out audio below a certain threshold. This is very useful if you have like a loud keyboard or other noises in your environment that you don't want your viewers to hear. Alright, so what I want you to do with this is bring the threshold down and speak into the microphone as silent as your voice gets on stream or in your recording. Not the silentest you can achieve, but the silentest that you are going to talk. Now you want to turn up the threshold until you can hear your voice cutting out. Once you notice that, bring the threshold back down like 2 decibels for some tolerance and leave it. I don't recommend touching the other settings like attack or release unless you know exactly what you're doing. But what I should be mentioning is that you can disable the expander to give you a far harsher cutoff. You probably need to adjust the threshold again after that, but I wouldn't recommend it anyway. The key filter is another option that might need tuning. What it does is that it cuts out a set frequency. This is useful if you have like a constant noise in your background, like a street for example. But for indoor use, you can usually turn it off. Okay, the next step is the compressor or the EQ. You can change the order of them up here. But why can you even change the order on these 2 settings? The reason is that if you put an equalizer in front of a compressor, it typically produces a warmer sound. And if you change the order, then you get a more clearer sound. Personally, I have the EQ before the compressor, simply for the reason that the GoXLR does so too. Okay, equalizing. It's not really a topic that I enjoy talking about, simply because I really don't know that much about it. But here's what I do know. Basically, lower frequencies on the left are more for bass and higher frequencies are more for clarity, but also for sharp sounds like sss. I recommend you to use my settings as a baseline and fine-tune it by first increasing the gain, listen to what each frequency is for and turn it back to your desired value. It's basically just trial and error. The compressor, however, is really easy again. By the way, I should mention that universal control comes with many different presets for the fat channel. For example, you can change the compressor preset from tube to standard. The first thing we want to do here is to set a 4:1 ratio, since this is basically the most used setting out there for content creation. Then you want to speak into your microphone like you would normally and decrease the threshold until you notice some compression going on. What we're aiming for is to only apply compression on sounds that are not constant. Audio peaks, for example. But we also want to make sure that we don't overdo it, so make sure to set it at a value that is only around the top. Also, depending on the compression threshold, your microphone volume is getting lower and you might want to increase the gain a bit to bring it back. You can once again try messing with the key filter to avoid compressing certain sounds, but that's just up to you. And yeah, that's basically it. If you're screaming into your microphone from time to time, then you could set the limiter, or if you want some fancy effects, try the voice tab. Otherwise, let's go ahead and save our preset, okay? Therefore, we want to head back to the main menu by clicking on the settings icon again, hit the little save icon, give our preset a name, select the slot, and click store. Now our preset is stored inside one of the 6 slots on the internal storage of the io44. You can also store it locally on your PC for backup reasons. Just select the preset you want to back up and click on this arrow. If you want to bind your preset to one of the physical buttons on the Revelator io44 itself, then you want to select the preset you want to change and turn the knob in the middle to the number you just stored your preset in. Now it's bound to the button and you can switch between them by pressing it. Another thing why the GoXLR is so popular is because it offers the ability to separate your game audio from your music or even Discord call. Well, the io44 can do exactly the same. Remember these sliders down here? The Revelator io44 offers one playback channel, which we currently use for our Windows sound, but also 2 virtual outputs called Virtual A and Virtual B. Let's say I want to control my music separately from the game audio. What you want to do is open a music application, say Spotify or YouTube Music, and play some music. Then head over to the Windows or macOS audio mixer, select the application, in my case with YouTube Music it's Brave, and select Virtual Output A or B as the output device. Now, as you can see, we have successfully separated the music playback. Don't worry, you are still going to hear everything. But what if you want to turn up the music for yourself, but not for your stream? Meet the audio mixes. For example, let's say I want to use Mix A for my stream audio. I want the music not to exceed a certain level, so I'm going to turn it down a bit. At the same time, I want my stream to hear my friends talking in Discord, and my game volume should be a bit louder. You can take a listen at this mix by clicking on the headphone icon. So what did I just do? We basically just adjusted our Stream Mix A microphone option that we can now use in OBS. This mix includes our microphone, game volume, as well as our adjusted Discord and music settings. But this mix is different from what you hear. Why? Because we are still on the main mix with our Windows settings. If you want to turn up the music just for you, then do it in the main mix. Your stream would not know. Pretty cool stuff, right? For your convenience, you can even rename the mixes and sliders. I, for example, renamed basically everything so that I instantly know how each slider is configured. Also, you can store your whole configuration if you click on this icon. Hit store and give it a name. You can store many of these so-called scenes for many different use cases. So in conclusion, the Revelator io44 is easily comparable to the GoXLR while only costing half as much. It offers an onboard storage for presets and therefore makes it even better than the GoXLR Mini, which comes in at a similar price point. Some things that are missing are of course the sliders, but if you have a smartphone or a tablet, you could substitute for the app for that. That being said, even though it has an onboard storage, like the GoXLR, Linux compatibility isn't really given at this point. In contrast to the GoXLR, the interface does work under Linux, but it is registered as a surround device, which also applies for the microphone. What that means is that you will be hearing your microphone more on the left instead of the right. So if you're looking to use this device outside of Windows or macOS, expect to run into some problems. But hey, at least it even works, right? And yeah, I think that's where I leave it. A good audio interface at the very competitive price point. And I cannot wait to play around with the voice effects. So if you've liked this video, make sure to show it. And while you're down there, even consider subscribing. If you've liked this video, then you might want to check out this one. But otherwise, all that's left to say now is good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you are. I'll see you around.